one thing that's important to understand is the goal of the Torah, the goal of the Bible, and what the people that wrote it had in mind, and what kind of God they followed. Because it starts with,
I am the Lord thy God, who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
I am the God that brought you out of slavery. This is important. Judaism, first and foremost, is a religion and a psychological layout of how to get out of slavery and never fall for it again. This whole religion, Judaism, was built around we don't want to be slaves. Not to anyone, not a king, not a priest, not anything. It's a constant struggle, even in the Bible, to keep it that way.
The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us who are all of us here alive this day.
I hope you're seated comfortably, because let's have a talk about the deeper things. Let's make it intimate. I have my cup of tea. Sit down, relax. Not everything needs to be under pressure. And the basics for what made us is, of course, the Judeo-Christian values that we unknowingly in the West and even outside the West had grown up with. But not knowing where we come from means that we also don't know where we're going. And that also means that we don't understand who we're going to be judged by. Why is it important to go back to the basics when society breaks down? You need to understand that the 10 commandments, which in Hebrew are the 10 sayings, and it might have been even 11 sayings in some variations of it, because I will bring the Shapira scrolls that I believe that with time it seems more and more likely that it was indeed authentic. Even the Bible has 2 versions of the 10 sayings, of the 10 commandments, which surprised me a lot when I told that to a devout Christian friend that I had, and he wouldn't believe me. And he said, "What are you saying? There isn't. There's just one." And I said, "No, there are 2. I know what I'm saying." And yes, there are 2 versions. The earlier version was the rougher note, and the later version, it fixed some of the misunderstandings or inaccuracies in the psychological layout of the first one. The 10 commandments were written with the mindset, with the purpose of keeping society intact. And I think an easy way to kind of give you the flavor of it is to actually tell you what is the 11th commandment that did not enter the ones in the Bible. And that is, you would not hate your brethren. You would not feel hate in your heart towards your brethren. What the Bible does have is you shall love your brethren and you shall not hold a grudge against them. And that is not an official part of the 10 Commandments. But I feel like it's one of the most famous quotes of the Bible. But it's not about it because it's out of the 10 Commandments, and I want to focus on the 10 Commandments today. Some background. I brought up the Shapira scrolls. So Shapira scrolls are scrolls that were found in the late 1800s. They were sealed in the same manner that the Dead Scrolls were sealed. It had parts of the Bible that were written in a bit of a different fashion from what we know, but very recognizable nonetheless. Unfortunately, back then, people assumed that that kind of preservation is impossible. The scrolls are lost, but they were copied, so we know what at least those who copied them, if they did a good job, and probably they did the best they could, they didn't have the technology we have today. That's what we have. And later on, we found the Dead Scrolls, which were sealed in the same way and were preserved the same way. And now we know that actually, yes, it was possible. Not only did we lose the Shapira scrolls that were found, we also lost Shapira himself, who, being accused of fraud, had decided to commit suicide. And I think that brings up again this culture, cancel culture that we have. Maybe if we had more patience. Don't be so quick to judge people, but be quick to judge ideologies. And I think it's important. Those who don't believe in the 10 Commandments, those who think that the Judeo-Christian value system is a myth, then their ideology is problematic and that should be fought with. But before you judge a person, you should at least know, have they even learned the 10 Commandments? That should not be taken for granted. Not every person learns it. And not every person that does something wrong does it because they do it on purpose. It's just that no one taught them otherwise. And I know that. I was a egocentric girl. And I remember in 7th grade when I was upset that my friend didn't bring me something to my birthday, my teacher was like, you know, her birthday came first and you didn't do anything either. And I was like, oh my God. And I felt so embarrassed that somebody had to literally tell me that. It's just that people can be stupid in most. We think it's obvious, but it's not. Sometimes we just need to point out the obvious to people as well and give that chance. Go to my Charlie Kirk video because there I brought exactly what God thinks of people that do not correct others. If I say to someone wicked, you shall die, and you do not give warning, you do not speak to warn them of their wicked course in order to save their life, then that wicked one shall die for their own iniquity. Well, from you I will require a reckoning for their blood. Because their sin, they're gonna get punished for it, but you're also responsible for it. Try to see if people even know and understand the foundation our society is built on. And you cannot do that without understanding how to read the 10 Commandments in a secular way. And it's important because if you are too passionate about something that is invisible and you cannot prove, you're gonna turn off those who are not exactly at the same boat as you when it comes to the kind of God you envision. For we all have our own understanding of what that God is. If somebody who insists that Jesus looks a certain way and you think that Jesus looks a different way, would you listen to whatever else they have to say? So this is exactly why you can guess why some commandments are in the 10 Commandments. Let's start with the beginning. All right, like I said, there are 2 versions and I'm gonna flip through them a little bit. I'm gonna read in Hebrew and I'm gonna use a different voice to read it in English because it's too hard for me.
And God spoke all these words, saying,
First introduction, something that is actually, now that we had archaeological finds, we understand that before introducing a set of laws, the God that brings it to the king also is named. It is true for Hammurabi laws. It's kind of a convention, all right? So what's different here that's very important is, first of all, what kind of God is the God that gives the 10 Commandments?
I'm the Lord thy God, who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage.
The God that we follow is the God that relieves us from slavery. It's the God of freedom. It's the God that showed us the path out of slavery, and especially out of mind-trapping slavery.
Thou shalt not make unto thee a graven image, nor any manner of likeness, of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth.
You shall not grave an image, because people fight over images. Yeah. If there is something that I learned is that you can definitely have a destructive war over not did God command this or command that, but over did God look like this or did God look like that. Aesthetics, they don't matter. So in order to make sure people focus on what's important, you have to remove the kind of imagery that you have in your mind that is irrelevant. And in fact, keep it as abstract as possible, because arguing whether God is truth, God is freedom, or God is life or God is all loving, all encompassing, or is God vengeful, that's a waste of time, because none of those arguments bring you anywhere. These kind of arguments break a society down. The 10 Commandments are there to uplift and make sure the society stays strong.
Thou shalt not bow down unto them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto the 1,000th generation of them that love me and keep my commandments.
The God that is telling us not to crave an image is also telling us to not worship anyone else. Now, it's very important that reading the Torah, you'd understand that first and foremost, when it comes to worship, the Torah says, follow my rules. That is the definition of worship.
And Moses called unto all Israel, and said unto them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the ordinances which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them and observe to do them.
It's not only the way you worship, which, by the way, even in Judaism, there is so much variation. Yet, we all worship the same God, so it doesn't matter. The same God means we all believe in those elements that make our society stronger. And the goal is to choose the blessing and life. Choose life. Life is important. It's the greatest gift gifted to us. And saying thank you and striving towards a better life. This is what the Torah is also and mostly about. It's very important that even if it is mistaken, because guess what? It's already fixed here. In the same book, there is already a difference, because there are nuances that were important, and guess what? There might be more nuances that we understand now and we didn't understand back then.
Thou shalt not bow down unto them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the third and upon the fourth generation of them that hate me.
Here comes a warning. If you stray away from that social building mindset, you're gonna ruin not just yourself, but your grandchildren and your great-great-children. When you stray away from the things that make society great, it's not only your generation that you punish, you punish the generations afterwards, who would have to work very, very hard to restore the way it was. And we are feeling it now.
And showing mercy unto the 1,000th generation of them that love me and keep my commandments.
Those who follow those rules, their life would be graced.
Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain.
Do not use God's name in vain. And that means do not claim that your way is God's way, because the punishment is very fitting. The next generations would remember those who led them astray, who claimed that God claimed something when God didn't. Character like Hitler, who also had a divine kind of messaging, and he is not cursed. Same with Muhammad. But not just Muhammad and Hitler, that in a way you could say were different because they didn't follow the Bible to begin with. Also rabbis and the Catholic Church, when they used God's name for their own benefit, that kind of leading astray will never be cleared, ever. The next commandment is the Sabbath. And I want to give a little bit of a tribute here to Charlie Kirk, whose next book that was supposed to be published, and I hope it would be, is about the Sabbath and its importance. Remember what I said in the beginning, that freedom and getting out of slavery is what drives the Jewish religion?
Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor, and do all thy work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath unto the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
So this is the first version, and the first version says that the reason that you have a break on the Sabbath is because God had a break on the Sabbath. But I guess that kind of reasoning didn't have the same merit as the next one, which is what is given in Deuteronomy. So the first version is in Exodus and the second version in Deuteronomy. So in Deuteronomy it says,
Observe the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, as the Lord thy God commanded thee. 6 days shalt thou labor, and do all thy work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath unto the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou. And thou shalt remember that thou was a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God brought thee out thence by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day.
Here it says, first of all, it's way more strict. It commands you the Sabbath. And it is way more elaborate on your animals are not going to work. Not your cattle, not your donkey, not your beasts, nothing. They're not going to work, understood? And your slaves, they're going to have a rest just like you do. Sir, because remember, you were a slave in Egypt. This is all against slavery. And if you're against slavery, it is for everyone. Wait, how can you say this is against slavery if your slaves are mentioned literally? And it says that they have to rest as well. How can that religion be against slavery? And it is so important because the next commandment is
honor thy father and thy mother.
And before I dive into that, I want to tell you a story. The Russian Empire was built upon a feudal system where there was an area and the peasants were the slaves and the castle owner owned them. And it was awful, honestly. It wasn't a good system. So the Tsar was against it and he canceled it. Do you know what happened when slavery was canceled? It was awful because on one hand, the peasants, they didn't have a system to sustain themselves. And their owners, previous owners, didn't have the incentive or the motivation to keep them alive either. Let me explain pretty simply, right? Yes, they worked the fields, but someone else managed the rations, meaning they worked in the summer, but then during winter, somebody would come and supply them with the food. Not necessarily that they themselves had enough food for the winter to survive and sell and have everything that they need without that system. It was a disaster. And therefore, the next one.
Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee.
Respect your father and mother, but I want to take it a step farther. Revolutions, they are disastrous. Every revolution that throughout the old system, with disregarding it, brought up a way worse situation. In fact, so many times, the system where they were at was improving. And because it wasn't improving fast enough, people got impatient and threw it away. Usually those who are really enslaved, who are really in such a state where the situation is really bad, they don't have energy for revolutions. You know who does? Those who, get more and more room to breathe, but not enough, according to them. So they throw away the old and bring the new. And when they do that, they bring a disaster. Yes, you need to have change, but you also need to respect your mother and father and understand that they follow the tradition and rules. Not doing that could be disastrous in a way that you don't understand because you didn't have enough time to see why something was done in the way it is done. And it is so fitting because you have to respect your mother and father so that your own life would be prolonged. He describes here a direct correlation between your ability to respect the elders with your ability to become one. And anyone who went through revolution would tell you that it's very hard to get old. So respect and understand that those who did some things that you think are ridiculous did them, because breaking them is worse. Yes, the slavery system in Russia was seized. It brought a disaster. And after that, it brought an even bigger disaster. The Tsar was better than communism. The Tsar, everything that the communism did, it was already planned. The railroads bidding, the Enlightenment, those were all plans that were about to be enacted anyway. The communists, they didn't bring anything, only disaster, death, the Holodomor. And when it comes to those who were ruling it, Lenin and Stalin, they did it on purpose because they were the evilest evil that you can imagine. Yes, the Tsar was evil and it was bad, but respect the old and understand it before you bring about any changes so that you could actually live your life truly. Get old. It's nice. It's a nice thing.
Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God commanded thee.
In this commandment, there is also a difference between Deuteronomy and Exodus. The Deuteronomy, once again, is like, your God commands you to respect your mom and dad. Because people are not that keen on following everything. So the Deuteronomy one is way more closes loopholes, I guess.
That thy days may be long, and that it may go well with thee upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee.
And it also adds on top of that, not only that your life would be prolonged, also that they would be good. It doubles down on the fact that you're going to have a bad life if you rebel too strongly. I want to stop here because there is a lot of debate, even the Talmud. Some of the Talmud rabbis had argued that the respect that is demanded here is obedience. And I know some rabbis argued it's obedience, and I would say it cannot be obedience. It can't be obedience. First of all, there are words for obedience. It's not respecting. And the other reason is that obedience means that there is no change. There is no evolvement. And I want to say that we can see that even here in the Bible, right? The version in Deuteronomy respects the version in Exodus, but it's not the same. It respects it, but it's not obedient to it, because there are things that need to be updated. And obedience is the version that the Quran adopted. So in Islam, it is complete obedience. And there is no respect, in a sense that those words are interchangeable, and that creates a society that is enslaved. And we are against slavery. Yes, you can find rabbis who would argue you have to obey your parents. I just want you to find a Jew that would actually do that. All right, so the next commandments are the ones that are the most universally accepted right now and seem like everybody knows that you're not supposed to do those things and it's taken for granted. And for that kind of mindset, I always have to say, if it had to be written, you cannot take it for granted. And, the Germanic tribes, they really didn't understand why you cannot murder. The weak can go to whatever because they're weak. So why wouldn't you murder them? Like, what is this kind of commandment? So believe me, if it was written, you cannot take it for granted. So the commandments are: do not murder, do not tinaf, do not have relations with a married woman. And I think it's very simple to understand why that would break a society down. But also, I think it's so important to understand that even that has nuances. I'm not sure how much I want to get into it in this video. You can check out what I said in previous videos. I think it's so important to maybe today look at that as not necessarily just adultery, but relations that would break a society in general. And not every relation that is idolatry in the old sense would break a society if it's for the betterment of society in general. Yes, it can happen. So people who are spies, people who infiltrate, the palace of a certain Persian king to save her people from execution, these kind of things might also happen. So when you write it down like that, it allows for the next generations to understand that the goal here is to make sure that the society doesn't break down more than anything. And same with stealing.
Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor.
The next commandment is Velo taneh berecha et shaker or et shav. So there are two versions here, and funnily enough, I think they're translated the same way in English for both of them. So twice it says in English, do not give false testimony, while there is a difference in the Hebrew version. So the first version is don't give a false testimony. The other one is actually don't give a testimony in vain. And I think that the reason they changed the word is also to say that even if something is true, it is in vain. You don't need to say things that are unnecessary. And I think it's very easy to think of those things that are true, but would cause unnecessary harm because they are private matters. Even if somebody is committing something that is against the Torah, not always is it the best thing to do. Because, you know what? If it doesn't damage, shut up. So Cat and Zones, just so you know, my Brigitte Macron's private parts, even if true, is in vain. And if it's not true, then it's a false testimony, for the record. And then my favorite, because this one is the anti-communism clause. Do not covet. And the difference here that I love is that for some reason in Deuteronomy, they realize that wanting the wife is not the same as wanting the house. So in Exodus, the house comes first, and in Deuteronomy, the wife comes first, and there is a different word used for her versus everything else. So do not covet the wife, and then do not lust for the house, the field. By the way, the field is added, and everything else.
Neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's wife. Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's house, his field, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's.
Don't want things that are not yours. That would save us from so many stupid ideas, like socialism, that is, out of greed, not out of fair work, and communism. I love that because I think it's the anti-communism clause. May we not covet what's not ours, but work to achieve our own. And also be happy with what you have. You don't even wish for it. It's like, it's his. Okay, that's his. And I have mine. Like, be happy with what you got. Just because life is not always fair. And I think it's also something that's important. Life is not always fair. Even if you deserve something and you don't get it, there is no one else to blame. And if it's not even that you have to blame yourself, it's just that life is like that. And the story of Job and other stories teach us that. It's not always that you get what you deserve. Sometimes you get things that you don't deserve. But it doesn't mean that you need to be wanting something that someone else has. Creativity is a better solution. And then the commandment that appears in the scrolls that Shapira found that doesn't appear in the Bible is, do not hate your brother in your heart. So don't hate. And then the last thing that is important, in the old world, the laws were given to kings. And Moses could have said, hey, I'm the king here, so those are my laws. Follow me. But no, actually, those laws were given to the whole people of Israel directly from God. Yes, Moses he wrote them down, but it is between us and God, and not us and Moses, but us and God, because a man can do wrong, and Moses did wrong. Every person can do wrong. So the commandments were given to us directly. Like, comment, subscribe. And if you guys want to support me, please consider going to Buy Me Coffee, PayPal, Patreon, whatever floats your boat to support this channel. Without your support, I cannot do what I do. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. See you later. Yes, by the way, I'm not perfect either, so just so you all know.